Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into a topic a lot of you requested, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And, we all want to understand our own emotions better,
Yeah.
right? Like who doesn't?
Absolutely.
And then there's all the sticky situations we find ourselves in with other people where
Mhm.
emotional intelligence can really come in handy.
For sure.
So we got our hands on this really interesting set of 5 tips for developing emotional intelligence. And we're going to break those down
Excellent.
tip by tip today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so tip 1, this one is all about practicing self-awareness.
Okay.
Now, I know that sounds like, well, duh, right? Like, who doesn't want to be more self-aware?
Right.
But how do we actually put that into practice?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say be more self-aware, but what does that actually look like?
Totally.
And, one thing that stood out to me from these notes you sent over was this emphasis on reflecting on your emotions, right? And how those emotions actually affect the way you behave.
Okay.
So it's like taking a step back for a second
Mhm.
and noticing, okay, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. Why am I feeling frustrated?
Mhm.
Is it really just because, someone spilled coffee on my new shirt?
Right.
Or is there something else going on? Maybe I'm stressed about that deadline.
Exactly.
Or I had a fight with my partner this morning. Like sometimes those deeper emotions, they kind of bubble up.
They manifest in weird ways.
Exactly, in ways we don't expect.
Yeah. So it's not just about labeling the emotion, but really understanding the root cause.
Yeah, and that why, that can be so powerful
Mhm.
because it helps you understand those patterns in your own behavior.
Yeah. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, oh, as I always get snappy when
Oh, yeah, all the time.
fill in the blanks?
It's like, why do I always do that?
Right.
But when you start paying attention to those patterns,
Yeah.
you can actually start to shift them,
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know I tend to get really defensive
Mm-hmm.
when I feel criticized. So how can I maybe approach those conversations differently next time?
That's so interesting because it's almost like you're anticipating those emotions and then preparing yourself.
Right. Exactly. It's like having that little heads up.
Okay, wow, this self-awareness thing, this is huge.
It is.
All right, let's move on to tip 2 because this one is big too.
Okay.
Developing empathy.
Ooh, empathy.
Yeah. This one I think is something that a lot of people struggle with
That's tough, right?
because it's so easy to get caught up in our own little world
Our own heads.
and our own perspectives.
Yeah.
But empathy is like this whole other level of understanding.
It's like stepping outside of yourself for a minute
Yes.
and really trying to see the world through someone else's eyes.
And this is the hard part, right? Even if you don't agree with them.
Exactly. Even if you're like, I would never do that, or I don't understand why they're reacting that way.
Right.
It's about trying to bridge that gap.
So it's more than just acknowledging that someone's feeling a certain way.
Right. It's not just saying, oh, yeah, that must suck for you and moving on.
Yeah.
It's about really trying to understand the why behind those feelings.
Okay. So can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you have a coworker
Mm-hmm.
and they're constantly late for meetings.
Oh, the worst.
Right. It's easy to get annoyed and be like, come on, man, get it together.
Totally.
But empathy might look like taking a moment to consider,
Yeah.
hey, is there something going on in their life that's causing this?
Like maybe they have a really long commute or they're dealing with a family situation.
Or maybe they're just really disorganized. But even then, it's like, okay, how can I approach this situation with understanding rather than judgment?
Okay, so empathy is not about letting people off the hook.
No, not at all.
It's about shifting your perspective.
It's about trying to meet people where they are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about self-awareness, we've talked about empathy, and now we're getting to the really juicy stuff.
Okay, good.
Tip 3, improving emotional regulation.
Oh, this is a big one.
Because we've all been there, right? Where
They've all been there.
those emotions just kind of hijack our brains.
Oh, yeah.
And we do or say things that we later regret.
That happens.
So how do we get better at this whole emotional regulation thing?
So emotional regulation doesn't mean suppressing your emotions.
Yeah, okay.
It's not about pretending you're not feeling something.
Great.
It's more about learning how to manage those emotions in a healthy way.
So what are some practical tips for doing that?
Well, one thing you can try is something called cognitive reframing.
Cognitive reframing. Okay, what is that?
So basically, it's like changing the way you think about a situation.
Okay.
Change the way you feel about it.
So instead of focusing on the negative, you're trying to find a more positive or at least a neutral way to look at it.
Exactly.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you're stuck in traffic.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. And you're already running late for an important meeting.
Okay.
Now, you could easily let the frustration and the anger take over.
Oh, yeah, road rage is real.
But with cognitive reframing, you might say to yourself,
Yeah.
okay, I can't control the traffic, but I can control how I respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of getting all worked up, I'm going to use this time to listen to that new audiobook I downloaded.
That's a really good idea, actually.
Or, maybe you can practice some mindfulness exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Or even just enjoy a few moments of peace and quiet
Okay, I like that.
before the craziness of the day really begins.
So it's about turning a negative into a positive, or at least a neutral.
Exactly. It's about finding that silver lining.
Okay, emotional regulation through cognitive reframing. Check.
Check.
Now let's talk about tip 4, which is all about enhancing social skills.
It's also a fun one.
Because this is where emotional intelligence really comes into play.
It's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yes, exactly. Like all of that self-awareness and empathy that we've been talking about, it all comes together in our interactions with other people.
And it's not just about being charming or charismatic.
Yeah.
Some people are naturally more extroverted than others.
Sure.
But social skills can be learned and developed.
So what are some of the key social skills that we should be focusing on in the context of emotional intelligence?
Well, one of the most important ones, I think, is active listening.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
So active listening, it's not just about hearing the words that someone is saying. It's about really paying attention.
Like truly listening.
Truly listening.
Yeah,
Not just waiting for your turn to talk.
exactly. And it involves things like making eye contact and nodding your head to show that you're following along.
Okay.
And asking clarifying questions to make sure you understand their perspective.
And not interrupting.
And not interrupting, yes.
Yeah.
It's about creating a space where the other person feels heard and understood.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And when you feel heard and understood,
yeah.
you're much more likely to open up and communicate authentically.
It builds trust.
It does. It really does.
Okay, active listening. Got it.
Okay.
What else?
Another important social skill is learning how to communicate your own needs and boundaries effectively.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is, but it's so important.
Yeah.
Because if you're not communicating your needs, how can you expect other people to meet them?
Right.
And this goes hand in hand with setting boundaries.
Okay.
Because when you set clear boundaries, you're basically teaching people how to treat you.
Okay, so how do we do that? Like, how do we get better at setting boundaries?
Well, it starts with identifying your own limits.
Okay.
Like, what are you willing to tolerate? And what are your hard no's?
Yeah.
And once you know what those boundaries are, you can start communicating them assertively but respectfully.
That's key, right?
It is, because you don't want to come across as aggressive,
No.
but you also don't want to be a pushover.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Assertive, but not aggressive.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
We are on a roll here with these emotional intelligence tips.
We're on fire.
But we have one more.
One more to go?
Tip 5.
Hit me.
This one is all about taking responsibility for your emotions.
Ooh, that's a big one.
I know, right? It's like the grand finale of emotional intelligence.
It ties everything together.
It does, because we've talked about self-awareness, we've talked about empathy, we've talked about regulating our emotions, and we've talked about improving our social skills.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it all comes down to this taking responsibility for our own emotional well-being.
It's about recognizing that while we can't always control the emotions that we feel,
Yeah.
we can control how we choose to respond to them.
So it's not about blaming other people
No.
or external circumstances for how we feel.
Exactly.
It's about owning our own stuff.
It's about that self-awareness piece again, right?
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
It really does, because when you can acknowledge your own emotions and you can see how they're impacting your thoughts and behaviors,
Yeah.
you can start to make different choices.
Oh, that's so powerful.
It's incredibly empowering.
Because it means that we're not just victims of our circumstances.
Right.
We actually have the power to choose how we want to show up in the world.
Exactly. And that's a really beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing.
It is.
Oh my gosh, this deep dive has been so insightful.
Well, it has.
I feel like I've learned so much about emotional intelligence
Me too.
and how to actually apply these concepts to my own life.
Yeah.
But now it's your turn, listener.
Yes. Tell us.
We want to hear from you.
What resonated with you?
What are your biggest takeaways from these 5 tips?
Yeah.
And what are your own personal strategies for navigating the sometimes choppy waters?
The ups and downs.
The ups and downs, yes, of emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Head over to the comments section and let us know your thoughts.
We love hearing from you.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Until next time, happy diving.
Bye, everyone.